And welcome back into another edition of Kolby's Corners, coming to you here live from Blacksburg, Virginia, Dealing with some Wi-Fi issues, coming in a little bit late here from practice, but appreciate everyone jumping in. Hopefully we can get this thing rolling. But yeah, first off, jumping into it, we just talked with new interim head coach Philip Montgomery at practice. Didn't see any live practice. And then also special teams coordinator Stu Holt. But I think the biggest news since our last live show was obviously Whit Babcock's press conference yesterday. Seeing a lot, obviously, out there on social media, as there obviously always is around the topic issue. But there's always a lot when anytime Whit Babcock speaks in front of the media. And I think a lot of people are taking maybe the words or the script that he was reading off of too much at face value. If you can sort of read between the lines of what he was saying, I think it aligns a lot with the reporting that's over on vtscoop.com. And I implore everyone, if you want to be ahead on this and really be in the know, make sure to go get that vtscoop.com subscription, because there has been a lot pouring out today and in the past week, especially regarding this whole athletic administration shakeup and honestly up the entire university. A lot of really great intel that you're not getting anywhere else. So make sure to go check out VT Scoop. Evan, CZY, all the guys have been doing a really, really great job covering this, and I think they're going to be ahead of the curve. So make sure to check that out. But yeah, going back to what Whit said, I think a lot of people are really focusing maybe too much on his words of saying he's advising the hire, and it's really come to the point where what decisions or power is he really commanding at this point? I don't know. Based on intel, it doesn't really sound like that. It sounds like this is going to be more of an imminent deal. I know some people are saying it's going to go on and extend. We feel pretty confidently that's probably not going to be the case, but we'll see. Go into more details over on the website. Like I said, appreciate all the support on here, but we still got to go drive it over on the website. So I feel pretty confident in our reporting on that, but definitely go check that out. And like I said, even in the show before Whit talked, I brought up that modernized NFL style structure, and you see that all over the place, especially like you look at a place like Oklahoma. They just go bring in that GM, and you're going to hear general manager a lot in this process as they're looking to build out that staff of having a more business savvy guy and then a general manager type role for the football side and like the corporate style athletics model. And it's a really interesting case study because you see it becoming so prevalent across collegiate athletics. Well, I mean, especially football programs. And it's like, is this really the most successful route, or is it just the newest thing? And you've seen it done differently. You've seen Stanford lay the groundwork with Andrew Luck. Now they're in a weird position where they pretty much made themselves have a lame duck head coach. You've seen UNC do it, obviously, with bringing in 70 players, and they've had some struggles. And then you've seen Oklahoma do it and pretty much get in stride, and Brent Venables looks like he's back rolling with a great quarterback. And now that's a little bit different because you bring in a quarterback and an offensive coordinator. But still, that GM role, it looks like college football is moving that way. And I think Virginia Tech is sort of tired of being behind the eight ball or behind the times in college football. So they're going to take a big swing there, it sounds like. Whit obviously pitched the $200 million budget plan, advancing, talking about the new resources promised. He didn't really give too much of an update on that. He did talk about how this has become obviously a multiple $100 million operation, so it needs to be run more like a business, touching on the last point. But we believe also like that is going to get rolling. Now, how that's going to be laid out, how much money they're going to have in the coaching pool, that's still to be seen. But for Whit's timeline, it definitely feels like the days are numbered, and could have some clarity on that here soon. So yeah, and he came out obviously like you should expect, and he read off his script, obviously didn't field any questions. I know a lot of people felt a certain way about that, but he tried to keep it very focused on Montgomery and the team. But I think the hints were definitely there at the larger structural overhaul, and we got into a lot of that over on the website. So hopefully the Wi-Fi is holding up here. I know it's a little shaky, still working through some setups, but appreciate everyone. Had a lot of really good content coming out. Now jumping into practice today before we touch on some other things. Talked to Philip Montgomery, and he really just stressed the energy, urgency, and trying to make sure there's stability in practice. He wants to see complimentary football against Wofford. He talked about the emotions the players were seeing, the emotions he had. Talked about the portal a little bit, but I think just jumping into it, like he was obviously hired by Brent Pry, I mean, among people on his staff. And then when that guy's fired 3 games into the season and you're asked to step up as the head coach, it's an interesting spot to be in. I think he's handled it exceedingly well, publicly forward facing, but it's going to be really tough to rally a locker room of 105 guys behind you and get them to play up for you. And he's saying all the right things, but there's definitely turmoil in that locker room. Everyone has their own agenda. Freshmen just got here. They're all trying to figure it out. You have guys who are on their last year, and this is it for them. You have guys who could take the red shirt, like you've seen with Dante Lovett, and go and preserve his red shirt and wait to go see what his next stop will be next year. So it's really sort of a shattered locker room. And it's like, how can you get them together? He talked about it a little bit, just trying to rationalize with them. Now we talked to Stu Holt too, and he said he was a little more pointed in saying these guys don't come to me and talk to me how they're feeling and all this. So I don't know. It's two different approaches, but it's going to be really interesting to see the buy-in, because it's definitely kind of leaning towards the latter where, it's tough to get up. I know Wofford, it is what it is, but after the last couple of results, you have the locker room shattered. It's going to be really interesting. We don't get to see practice, but just some of the overall vibes is it's going to be tough. And then you want to talk about it. Phil Montgomery touched on some of the O-line health updates. Obviously, no surprise. We've known that Brody Meadows has had a pretty serious injury, and Phil Montgomery said all but essentially confirmed that he's out for the rest of the year. Had a procedure, so he's going to be done for the year. And that room's still dinged up. Johnny Garrett didn't play against Old Dominion. Montavious Cunningham didn't play against Old Dominion. You saw true freshman Gavin Crawford get a lot of reps, Aiden Lynch, Tommy Ricard. You saw those guys play a lot. Like, that line is still banged up. And Wofford has not been great, but Virginia Tech definitely hasn't been good. When you go through it, Virginia Tech's defensive numbers have really, really struggled. And Montgomery even talked about that. Like, he tried to obviously bring up the defense and said, Wofford does a lot of good things on offense. But it's going to be really interesting to see how Sam Stefkis tries to respond, because all these coaches are coaching for their jobs. This is their resume for future employers and future positions. Same with all the players. Everyone's just putting out on tape to see what the next stop is. Everyone's coaching for their job in the future. Everyone's playing for their position in the future. Trying to put out good tape. So there's still stuff to play for. Maybe not the collective goal of Virginia Tech, but everyone still is intrinsically motivated to future better themselves. So it'll be interesting to see what Stefkis rolls out. And like I touched on it a little bit in the last one. Maybe there were a little bit too many cooks in the kitchen with Pry and running his defense. So it'll be interesting to see if you see a tick up because you're playing against Wofford, or if the defense just looks more together. Are they playing more together because the locker room feels like they need to have a get-back game, or is the scheme just better? So it's really going to be interesting to see. Tying in with that, I guess some of the roster movement talk as well, just going out of what Philip Montgomery said. I think that was pretty much it. He talked about the conversations he's having with guys. And I think it's so interesting that he's been put in this position, because obviously all these guys on this roster committed to Pry at one time or another. Transfer portal, high school, they all committed to Pry. And when Phil, he came in so late in the cycle, half these guys, even from the portal, weren't even being recruited by him. So now he's having these conversations with guys trying to see where their head's at, pretty much having exit meetings in the middle of the year on where their head's at, what their priorities are, having real conversations about, if you do this, what's real, what's fake, because so much out there is not real information, trying to discern what's real and what's good and what's the best decision for their future. Obviously, like we touched on, Dante Lovett was the first domino to fall. He's already in the portal. And breaking news today, there's only going to be one transfer portal window in that winter. So that's another wrinkle mixed in there. But it's going to be really interesting because, like I said, the true juniors really have the most to gain with this. But then you have some true sophomores who also have stuff to gain. You can play your fourth game against Wofford if you've played 3 games and get up to 4 games of film, then take a red shirt. Or like guys are maybe going to be slower back from injury, obviously looking out for themselves. It's just going to be really interesting to see how it shakes out. There's going to be a mass exodus at the end of the year, one way or another, from the coaching staff to the players to the admin. But it's just, what can you do in the interim? So it almost seems, and I feel like I keep using the word, but almost asinine and silly to talk about the game against Wofford, because in the larger scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. You've punted on this season, but to see what core will stick around. Like, there's some names that you can see sticking around, but at the end of the day, you saw some names that you didn't think were going to move on last year move on. So it really is going to be interesting. I think for this week, you're not going to really see many other opt-outs. The following week, you definitely could see some, and guys could change their minds as things progress. But right now, it's definitely a little bit split among parents, among players, a lot of people feeling a lot of emotions, and rightfully so. And man, that O-line depth against Wofford too. It's like it's going to be really valuable for a lot of those offensive linemen, but everyone's going to be thinking about themselves, and rightfully so. So a couple more topics. I know we touched on a lot Monday. Hopefully the Wi-Fi is still cooking. Hot board chatter, like I said, a lot of names are going to come out in this process, and it is so early. It's September 17th. Jobs are going to come open, and there's going to be a lot of movement between now, November, and close to December. So there, really, names you're hearing now are not going to matter. Like John Summerall, I think he'd be a great candidate. Do I think John Summerall is going to end up at Virginia Tech? No. Like if he wants to leave Tulane this cycle, I think he's going to have an opportunity at a much better job. There's a couple other names I think fall into that category. I saw, who was it? Who was referenced for one? Like agents are going to be pushing guys' names that are going to get people. And I know when you hear the name Shane Beamer, Mike Vick, that they get a rise out of fans, but it's agents. And there's also some of the donor base and people that actually feel convicted about those hires. Maybe not as realistically, but still those names are coming up. It's going to be a very thorough search from the board. They've reached out to a lot of people for consultant on not specifically the hire, but just the overall structure. When you talk about that corporate style, moving to that more modernized style, they've got consultants from a lot of really big names that are surprising that the board and other people involved have reached out to that are really valuable, done it at a really, really high level at college football. So the fact that they're getting feedback from them has been, I think, pretty promising, just hearing that on the back end. So some of those names, like as we get closer, we will have a clearer picture. But for right now, a lot of that is really just driving clicks and different things. Now, I mean, you'll hear the names Golish, Chesney, I know has come up, Dan Mullen. If you go over vtscoop.com, I think we had about 8 threads open with Dan Mullen, Pat Fitzgerald, a couple other names, but it's going to be a bigger cycle as opposed to last year. That's why I think if some of these systemic changes up the chain of command, especially when you had the board aligned, and everyone likes to say the word aligned. When you had this board aligned and they wanted to make some of these sweeping changes, it maybe would have been a lot more advantageous if you saw the writing on the wall last season with Whit, with Pry, and with others, obviously, on the staff. Just a couple other things. I think with that, there's some of those commits in that 2026 class that really like Blacksburg, really like Virginia Tech. And while they might have some other options, they're not super viable options. So these guys are really going to be watching this coaching search down the line. And I know that's not as important in the moment, obviously, because that roster is going to change so much. But if you can keep a quarterback and some of those guys, that is still really valuable because the coach is going to come in. He's going to take probably maybe some guys, if he's still an active coach from where he's coming, but to try and land a class in like 15 days, 2 weeks, as opposed to if it's November, mid-December. And if you can keep some of those guys, it gives you a nice head start. So that's another just wrinkle in there to watch. If you can keep some of those guys in the class and depending what time they decide on a head coach. Another thing that I think just food for thought to throw out there is what is the NIL marketing arm going to look like? Like what is Triumph going to look like specifically? Or like what is a Hokie, like how are these organizations going to look when they pretty much rework this entire framework? And it's just something that they're going to have to work through if it folds into like more in-house model, if they try and morph some of it, it's just going to be really interesting how that all works out. And you're going to see some of that right now with guys forfeiting some of their NIL checks if they obviously redshirt and leave early. So that is going to be, I think, another thing. Down the line, obviously, there's more pressing issues with the game on Saturday. Who's actually going to be here with the transfer portal? Who's going to be the head coach? Who's going to be the GM? Who's going to be that CEO type? But I think that's going to be an important wrinkle too, because there's so many layers of working through this. So I think those are really good points, but I think Philip Montgomery is saying all the right things publicly forward facing. I'm not exactly sure how the guys are going to come out. It's definitely been a week and they've had some time now to, I guess, sort of get it together, but you know, it's become much more of a business now and these guys have rooted interest in themselves, obviously, and rightfully so. But I think overall, the Whit Babcock presser was pretty telling if you look past the words and just the nomenclature. And I would implore everyone, go check out vtscoop.com, running 60% off. I mean, you cannot get better value. If you want to be up to date and in the know with the most up to date and accurate coming out Virginia Tech info in this tumultuous time, cannot implore you enough. Evan G. Watkins doing great work. Mateus and Marie doing incredible work. Everyone's crushing it. So definitely go check it out. Appreciate everyone jumping in here. Hopefully the Wi-Fi held up. Going to be doing more of these. But yeah, so everyone have a great Wednesday. And next one of these, we'll see you right after the game on Saturday. And we'll see if Virginia Tech goes to 0-4 or Philip Montgomery becomes the winningest head coach in Virginia Tech history based on winning percentage. So until then, make sure to go check out vtscoop.com. Follow me on the socials on YouTube at Kolby Crawford for more of these. Been a ton of fun. Appreciate the support, and we'll keep you updated. See you next time.